Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this session this afternoon on Introduction to Career Planning for Apprentices. My name is Laura Woodward. I'm a career and professional development advisor working at the Royal Society of Chemistry. So my role in the main involves supporting our members with their careers, be that helping them explore their career options, what they want to do, taking next steps, but also providing lots and lots of practical advice around finding jobs, applying for jobs, doing CVs, preparing for interviews, all those things that come with that. So bring all that experience from that. And I also have my background is actually in HR and recruitment. So some considerable experience around recruitment as well. So today I'm going to be covering a few things over the next sort of 40 minutes or so. There will be time at the end to take a couple of questions. So please feel free to type those into the question box, and I will take a look at those at the end. And like I say, there'll be a chance to hopefully pick up 2 or 3 of those, but just type them in as they come to you, any sort of questions that you want to ask me or anything you want me to clarify. So you can see really what I want to focus on is giving you that opportunity to really identify and understand your skills, your strengths and motivation around work. And we'll think about how to use information to sort of plan your career and achieve your career goals. And I'm going to cover some themes that really kind of support that. So I'm going to talk quite a little bit about reflective practice, so what that is and why you would want to engage in it, and the tools to support you in doing that. I'm also going to talk about selling your skills and the best way to do that on CVs. I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail on that, but just some sort of general sort of top tips. And then I'm also going to build that in terms of thinking about your CPD, that continuing professional development and its importance, and sort of building these good habits around self-reflective practice, which can really support that. So if we move to self-reflective practice and what that is. So self-reflection is an incredibly underrated activity. Quite often that's because actually it's quite a difficult difficult thing to make time for. It's often the thing we sort of deprioritize, when we're busy at work, so it's difficult to make time for, or sometimes we're just not sure, well, how do we do it, what does it mean, and it can feel uncomfortable because often we're not used to sort of talking or thinking about. Oh, let me just go back to the start. Bear with me.
Apologies for the sound issues. I think it's the Wi-Fi.
Oh,
Laura, I'm sorry for the interruption.
that's all right.
Our guests were commenting that the sound wasn't coming through. So if you
Oh,
wouldn't mind starting again,
no, of course
thank
I
you very
don't.
much.
No, not a problem at all. I will start again. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. So welcome. This is a session around Introduction to Career Planning for Apprentices. My name is Laura Woodward. I'm a career and professional development advisor based at the Royal Society of Chemistry. So my role is around really supporting our members, whatever career they're doing, whatever stage of their career that they are at, and that support varies. So it could be but really practical advice around job hunting, applying for jobs, so what to put on CVs, how to do cover letters, practicing interviews, thinking about preparing for interviews, but also just more broadly helping people just explore and think about their careers. So whether that's sort of helping them reflect and think about their next steps, planning in what they want to do, and really just helping them think about their general kind of career planning and CPD. So it's a really varied role that I really enjoy, and I've been doing this role for about 12 years now. And prior to that, I have a background in HR and recruitment, so lots and lots of experience of reading CVs and helping people kind of think about their careers. So today we're going to cover a few things, and really this is your opportunity to start thinking about how you sort of identify and understand your skills, because that's actually really key when we're thinking about our careers and sort of planning our careers. And when you've got that understanding of your skills and your strengths and your motivations around work, that can really support you, whether you're immediately kind of thinking about moving jobs, or you're ready to make that next step, or just more generally in terms of identifying how you want to grow, things that you want to develop. So we'll talk a little bit, quite a bit actually, around sort of things around reflective practice, so what it is, why it's important to engage in it, and tools that can support you in undertaking that practice. I'm also going to touch on how we sell those skills and why it's really important that we sort of sell those skills to an employer. So I'm going to touch a little bit on CVs, and then I'm also going to touch on CPD, so that continuing professional development and its importance, and why sort of building those good habits with sort of CPD will also really add value in terms of that sort of reflective practice and thinking about how you kind of build your skills and develop in your career, not just in terms of the next job move, but generally how you sort of build and develop in your current role, for example. So self-reflection is actually quite an underrated activity, because it's quite difficult to make time for, or actually we sort of deprioritize it, when work is busy, when life is busy, it's not necessarily the thing that we're kind of making time for. Often also we're not quite sure how to do it, what's the best way to undertake that activity. And it can also feel uncomfortable, because we're not used to talking or thinking about ourselves and taking that time to sort of think about ourselves. And I mean that in terms of successes, so reflecting on what went well, as much as reflecting on when things perhaps haven't gone the way that we hoped. But it is really important, and it has lots of benefits for that sort of longer term career success. And really it's about working out and reflecting and recording in a way that works best for you, and that's really key in establishing that sort of habit and getting into that practice of self-reflection. And the things that you're wanting to achieve by doing that is getting that deeper understanding and sort of knowing yourself better. So it's taking stock of why you do what you do, how you do what you do, and it's a chance to identify what you do and don't enjoy. And when you're doing that reflection, that how we do things, the why we do things, perhaps why we don't enjoy certain tasks, are there ways that we can then think about, ultimately, can we do more of what we enjoy? What skills are you looking to develop or strengthen that you could have done differently? It's also about increasing your self-awareness, and actually that's a skill that employers value. So actually, just by doing this self-reflective practice, you're also building up that skill of self-awareness, and actually that having that self-awareness is really vital to enable you to define your own unique career success, and recognizing that success is not the same for everyone. So a successful career for person A is not going to be how person B defines a successful career. So it's really important that you're taking that time to identify what drives you, so that you can understand and shape your professional niche and get what you want out of your career. And self-reflection is where that sort of deep learning happens, and it's an important part of career development, and it's something to do throughout your career. So making time for it is important, and make it an ongoing habit. So through that reflection, you can start to identify your goals. So are there specific areas that you want to develop? You know, what do you want? What do you need in order to achieve success? It also enables you to identify gaps. So that might be, you might be working with a mentor, it might be your line manager that you're having conversations with. Colleagues actually can be really valuable for that sort of reflection as well. Often we actually overlook our own skills. So actually by speaking to people, speaking to others, that's really, really vital, because then you get that much more rounded view of yourself and your abilities. Identify any barriers to that skills development. Is it lack of support? Is it lack of time? Is it lack of opportunity? And is there anything that you can do to sort of break down some of those barriers, or get support with that? And try and establish a roadmap for how you might meet those gaps and overcome any of those barriers. And you know, maybe that you don't have any gaps, so there isn't anything specific that you've identified where you've got a gap, but it's still really useful to do that skills gap analysis. So again, work with your line manager. If you've got a mentor, this is something that's really, really good to have conversations with, to, like I say, get that sort of deeper understanding about yourself. So use that self-reflection to really think about what went well with what you're doing, and why, what motivates you, what learnings might you apply to new areas, how could you do things differently, and really sort of challenge yourself to sort of think about those things. Excuse me. There are lots and lots of benefits of all of this, and you can see I've identified some of those here. So like I said, that getting that better understanding of yourself and what drives you and motivates you can be really, really crucial in terms of your sort of career planning. But it's going to be individual to each of you. So really, you know, it could be things around looking at your sort of confidence and self-awareness. It's about helping you identify what you enjoy and find rewarding. It's about enabling you actually to, might just simply be about getting better at what you already do. People actually also find it quite energizing to you know, take that time out for themselves to kind of reflect and think about where they're at, what they'd like to do better, you know, where they ultimately might want to develop their careers. So you know, it should be it should be a positive experience doing that reflection. It could be that you start creating opportunities for yourself, or just more likely to start seeing those opportunities kind of appear. I had a great story actually with someone. Actually, I think it was at the technicians conference last year, and this manager was saying that she has got into this habit of every year, you know, slightly separate from a more sort of formal aspect of the performance review, but getting her team members to really kind of think and reflect on where they're at, what their strengths are, what motivates them, what, you know, what's kind of important to them in terms of their career. And she said she'd done this with a member of her team, and then about a month later, this member of her team said to her, this job, like, that's just perfect for me, has just materialized, and it's just, it's perfect, it ticks all the boxes. And actually what we both said is, actually, if that individual perhaps hadn't taken that time to just reflect and think about their motivations and their strengths, so actually they had that deep understanding, they may not actually have seen that job, or it may not have spoken to them in the same way. So again, it might not feel immediately obvious that those sort of benefits are immediately there, but actually, like I say, it's this deeper understanding that adds value over time to kind of gain that sort of deeper understanding of yourself. It might enable you to build up more sort of personal leadership skills, influence within your team. Sometimes it can enable you to sort of give back to your community and your team, depending on kind of what you're identifying. And ultimately, it really supports that sort of career planning. So helping you kind of find roles that match you and what motivates you. And when you are applying for jobs, it's really, really important that you are articulating your values and your strengths when you're sending in those CVs and those cover letters. Employers absolutely want to understand about your knowledge and your experience and your skills, but actually they also want to understand the why. So why is it that you want to do that role? So again, if you've already done that thinking, you know what motivates you, you know what types of organizations align with your values, you understand what your strengths are. When they're asking those questions, when you're writing that detail on the cover letter, you've already done that thinking, and that will really, really help as well. So like I said, that getting that better understanding of your drivers and motivators is really, really important. And then it's about how you kind of plan and shape the career you want. So seeking out those opportunities that align with your purpose. So that might be, particular types of responsibility. It might be particular types of organisations. It might be a new role. It might be something completely different. But by doing that review, addressing any skill gaps that you might have identified where you're able to, and taking on perhaps tasks that you've avoided before or didn't feel as confident with, for example. And really that's how you start to kind of recognise and live your sort of professional drive and niche, and what makes you you and what you can bring, and ultimately the sort of success that you want in your career. As I said, it's all about identifying kind of, what works best for you in terms of that sort of that self-reflection. And there's exercises that you can do to kind of support that self-reflection. So it might be about identifying mistakes or skills that you want to learn or develop. It could be around developing critical thinking and problem solving skills. So what could you have done differently and why? It's going to be about sort of tracking progress against goals, reviewing your learning, perhaps cementing those concepts in your mind. And it's also about sort of developing this sort of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and potentially helping you kind of build sort of resilience and manage stress. So it's lots of different things. And you could pick an event and sort of reflect on that. So it could be a meeting, you could pick aspects of a day or review a whole day. It could be a training session that you've been on. And I'll talk in a moment in a bit more detail on how you might want to do that. And also choose what works best for you. So recording those details after an event, but in a way that works for you. And again, I'll sort of touch on some ideas around that in a moment. So it might be you're thinking about improving your communication skills. So is that around sort of expressing your thoughts and feelings more clearly? And like I say, find a way that works for you. So you might have a separate notebook where you're kind of going away and reflecting. So you might there might have been a particular scenario that went really well, and you're just going to spend a few minutes just reflecting on that. It could be a notebook, it could be a diary, it could be an electronic notebook, it could be might be post-it notes, or an audio journal, or mind maps, or a CPD tracking tool, you know, or a drawing, like whatever works for you, to just take that time and, you know, go sort of slowly with yourself. It doesn't have to be war and peace every day, so it doesn't have to be huge amounts of detail. You know, a few regular notes and just getting into that habit will probably feel much more manageable. And don't feel you have to sort of amend or sort of censor what you write. You know, nobody's going to see that document apart from you. And like I say, what you ultimately want to do is sort of build in this habit of self-reflection. So again, sort of think about, is there a time that works well for me? Is early morning good? Is it about doing it at the end of the week and picking one thing? Is it at lunchtime? And remember, it's about reflecting on the positives and the negatives. So you will learn as much from your I don't like the word failures, but you know, when things don't go how you planned, you know, you'll learn as much from those as the successes as well. And questions that you could be sort of asking yourself could be things, as I said, you know, it might be that you pick a specific situation or something that happened in the day, good or bad. What would you do differently and why? And just taking that moment to sort of reflect on it. You know, what have you learned about yourself, your work, or others? Take some time and just sit and think, gee, what does a good day look like to me? What would I have been doing? What sort of things would have I been involved in? Who would I have been interacting with? And just taking that time to just, like I say, build that understanding of what a good day looks like to you. Asking yourself, what does success mean to me? And what does it mean to me now? Is that the same as it was at the start of my career, or just 6 months ago, or a year ago? You know, recognize that success can and will change over time, because you will change over that time. Your priorities might change, things outside of work might change, which affect your priorities, your motivation. So take that time to ask yourself that question at various points throughout your career. Another question you could ask, what's gone well this week? What's gone less well? What could I do differently? What might help to make that week that's not gone so well be better next week? What goals am I working towards, and where am I now in relation to my goal? Are there any barriers, and what's stopping me? What can I maybe do to facilitate that? And think about, you know, who you're speaking to when you're asking these questions. Like I say, it doesn't, some of it can be on your own in your own time. Some of it might be with a line manager, some might be with colleagues. Sometimes friends have useful sort of insights just generally around that sort of understanding about you. And you may also want to consider a mentor. So whether that's someone within your organisation, whether you can access a mentor through other means. So for example, the Royal Society of Chemistry has access to mentors for our members, because actually mentors can really help sort of facilitate that sort of self-reflection. You know, they're actually giving you that sort of time and space to just take that time out and really sort of think about yourself. And actually what can sometimes be beneficial with a mentor is, you know, they often will come with different experiences and insight, but also they are independent from the rest of your life. So they are, you know, they're not your line manager, they're not your friend, they're not your colleague, they're not your partner. And sometimes that can be really helpful to really have those that conversation with someone where maybe you don't want to say some of those things to those particular people. But a lot of this work might just be yourself taking that time and just reflecting on things. So like I say, you know, supporting that self-reflection, you know, speaking to a variety of different people. A really nice question actually to kind of ask others is a nice one here. What problems would they bring to you and know you could help them with? What do they think are your strengths? And actually that can give really nice insight, and don't be afraid to do that. So I did a similar exercise at the start of the year with some of my colleagues. I picked a few sort of random sort of peers, couple of managers, and just asked them to kind of reflect and give me some feedback around what my strengths were, and everyone was actually really sort of positive, and where and sort of gave sort of critical feedback as well, and kind of gave me reassurance around what I felt my strengths were absolutely the ones that they identified as well. And so don't be afraid to kind of go out and ask people for that feedback. Also take some time to identify your values and mission. You know, understanding, I think, what motivates you, what's important to you in terms of your values, can also be really, really important in that aspect of career planning. It's not always possible that we can do a role that, you know, 100% aligns with our values, but I think where we can kind of get that deep understanding, that will support us. And obviously where you can, get support from mentors, careers advisors, coaches, that can all help with that self-reflection. And ultimately, you know, having that ability to keep learning about yourself, reflecting on what you've learned about yourselves and others, you know, it enables you to sort of define who you are, you know, what you have to offer, you know, unique to you in terms of your sort of career and experience. And you can see here, you know, I've highlighted really the sort of breadth of skills that scientists have, and sort of core skills that employers look for. So we often you know, really stress the importance of understanding what you have to offer in terms of your transferable skills, and doing that self-reflection will really support that. And we say transferable skills, but as I just said earlier, really they're sort of core skills. So when you can sort of spend that time identifying your skills, you know, that will really support you in that sort of career planning as well. So, you know, knowing what skills you enjoy using can often help you sort of figure out what types of work you enjoy, what suits you, or maybe helps you see yourself in a different role, and will often help you sort of strengthen your job application. So giving you that confidence really to sort of sell yourself. Because it's your sort of technical skills, your sort of scientific skills are not the only things that any sort of employer is going to be looking for. You know, those other things. So some of those highlighted there. So things like attention to detail, time management, problem solving, working with others. You know, all those things are important to any future employer. And, you know, it's important to recognise that, you know, those skills that you have belong to you, and you know, it's not, they don't belong to your qualification, they, you know, they don't belong to your university, they don't belong to employer, they are your skills. So it's asking yourself, you know, what do I do well? What types of tasks or problems do I enjoy working on? Again, as I said before, what problems do people come to you with, knowing that you're going to be able to help them with it? And are you aware of all the skills that you have? So like I said, don't be afraid to ask others. Reach out to people who can maybe help you understand them. And like I said, don't just purely rely on your sort of technical knowledge. And again, just kind of really sort of highlighting those sort of, they're sort of all used interchangeably here: soft skills, transferable skills, core skills, but thinking about those sort of skills, particularly, you know, for those of us in sort of those sort of scientific roles, that sort of analysis and problem solving, being really strong communicators, that sort of project management, time management, organisation skills, that ability to sort of research, that information management, working in teams, and like I said, you know, core to any job that you do for whichever organisation it is, whichever employer it is, whatever sector or field it is, you know, those core skills of working with others, planning and managing your time, making decisions, and solving problems is really, really key. So like I said, what you're doing is sort of, by doing that self-reflection, you're building up that deeper understanding of how good you are at those things, and then you're able to sell those to any future employer. And like I said, when you also spend that time getting that understanding of your motivations, that also enables you to get across to any future employer that you are genuinely committed to the role and the organisation. And it's really, really important to get that across, you know, being able to demonstrate that sort of genuine interest and enthusiasm for a role. It will be really, really important when you are applying for things. I'm just going to share a couple of slides around sort of job searching and CVs. I can do whole presentations just on these. So this is a light touch, but when you've kind of done that self-reflection, you may be thinking, actually, I'm ready to move. You know, you've taken that time to identify what your transferable skills are. So whether that's from your studies, whether it's from your work experience, and whether that's sort of paid or voluntary experience, those are the things that you're going to want to kind of express and demonstrate on a CV to an employer. And it's about how you sort of sell yourself and clearly present your experience on a CV that's going to be crucial. So really, really key is tailoring your cover letter and your CV to every role that you're applying for. So you're really honing in on those specific skills, and you know, you're open to you know, what's out there. So it's about sort of keeping those options open and recognizing that for some roles you'll be really particularly focused on particular skills. Other roles you may be drawing to the forefront some different types of skills. So making sure you sort of tailor that CV is really, really important. So you ideally want to keep your CV to 2 pages, and your CV really is your sort of what, so what you're about, and you want it to sort of focus on your achievements, outcomes, impacts, results of your work. So backing up what you're saying you can do with evidence. And again, that self-reflective practice will support you when you get to that point. So like I say, tailor every application that you make and be really explicit. So make it really easy for them to see how you fit with the role. So I always recommend a great format for a CV is a skills-based CV. And with a skills-based CV, basically that first page of a CV is kind of the shop window, if you like, of what you've got to offer, and you're kind of mirroring back to them their job description. So you'd have your contact name and contact details at the top. You'd have a section called skills, and then subheadings are going to be the skills that they're looking for. So it could be sort of technical, scientific knowledge, but it's also going to be those transferable skills. So time management, problem solving, decision making, working with others, etc. They're going to be your subheadings. And then underneath, you're going to bullet point 2 or 3 detailed examples that enable you to demonstrate that you've got experience of those skills. So you're then able to say to that employer, you've asked for someone with skills A, B, C, D, E. Here you go. Here's how I've demonstrated those skills in the past, and recognise the value of transferable skills. So you might be applying for a role where you've not had that job title before. You maybe haven't had direct experience with that type of organisation, but if you can solve a problem in organisation A, you can solve a problem in organisation B. If you can organise your time in organisation A, you can organise yourself in organisation B. So really make sure you're kind of selling those transferable skills, and like I say, be really explicit about what you have to offer. The cover letter is really about the why. So it's about showing that you've done your research on the role and the company, and you're telling them what it is about why you want to go and work for them. So demonstrate that sort of passion and enthusiasm for the job, the company, the sector. It doesn't have to be over the top. It doesn't have to be lines and lines, but just actually that ability to demonstrate you've thought about why you want to do this job. It is not simply because you meet the selection criteria. It's about, you know, specific things to do with the job that you feel draws on your strengths, or tasks that you would enjoy doing in that role, specific things about who the organisation are and what they do, that really align with you know, what motivates you. It's those things that you need to get across, and actually really add value to a application form, because actually it really helps you sort of stand out amongst all the other candidates who, give or take, are going to have sort of similar experiences. So it really elevates your application when you take that time. Just to kind of touch on a few things around how you can sort of develop your skills. You know, you might be identifying things that you want to develop, but how can you sort of build on those? And you can see I've given a sort of a variety of different things, and examples here. Some might be more relevant and applicable than others, but I think the key message to kind of get across, and what's important, is that we view professional and sort of skills development, this self-reflective practice, so this and sort of career planning, not as this sort of extra thing, if you like, but something that we kind of schedule into our workload, as it's, you know, it can often be the first thing to go when we get busy. As I said before, you know, it's very easy to you know, deprioritize those things, you know, so make sure you're sort of speaking to your manager about how you can sort of build that opportunity, and to sort of think about these things, and then what opportunities there are that can help develop you. And, you know, you can see there, you know, skills development doesn't have to be, you know, a paid training course or even paid work. You know, volunteering can actually be sometimes really valuable. And we develop skills, you know, every day. You know, we might be teaching or sharing something with a colleague, when we're listening to others, when we're perhaps supporting and advocating for others, or offering our help with something. You know, we're developing skills all the time. Listening to a webinar, for example, is really valuable skills development as well. So don't always think, oh, it's got to be a sort of a training opportunity. I just wanted to flag sort of thinking about ways to sort of record and sort of think about your development. So I know not all of you will be members of the RSC. You may have professional bodies that offer other types of sort of recording tools, but just to highlight that the RSC has launched our Pathfinder tool, which is a personalised professional development tool, which is exclusive to our members, and really kind of supports this self-reflection. So it enables you to understand the gaps in your skills, identify activities from across the RSC and beyond that can absolutely help you sort of develop further. But it also provides this opportunity to kind of think and reflect on your progress. So you can complete questionnaires that make suggestions for you. You can add in your own sort of goals or things that you want to think about, and you can use it as this space for self-reflection. So if you are a member, I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that. And again, as a member, we also have access to an online careers toolkit, and actually that has lots of assessments and resources to kind of support that learning that I was talking about. So it might be helping you explore your sort of learning styles, your thinking styles, what motivates you. So again, if that's applicable, do go and have a look at that. So I think just to sort of finish off with, there's lots to sort of think about when you're sort of planning your career, making those choices for kind of what's next. So kind of research, explore, understand what your options are, and there will be lots of options. Don't necessarily sort of pigeonhole yourself or sort of think you're kind of limited to certain things. What I didn't say earlier is, when you are maybe thinking about applying for jobs, don't talk yourself out of things where you don't tick everything on the job description. If you hit 75% of what they're asking for, it's always really totally appropriate to put in an application. Job descriptions are written for the perfect candidate. Perfect candidate doesn't exist. It's about the skills that you bring, but also that motivation. So don't talk yourself out of things where you don't tick every single box. Like I say, doing this audit constantly, reflecting and auditing your transferable skills, your technical skills, reflecting on what you want out of your career, creating your career criteria, whether that's in the immediate future or the sort of ultimate long-term aim, and explore the bigger picture. So what experience or skills do you need to get to where you want to go? So it might be you have that sort of longer term aim, or it might be more short term aim. And like as we say, try and speak to a variety of different people. So yeah, do that self-reflection, research, network. If appropriate, start thinking about your CV, utilizing LinkedIn. Think about what job titles you want to search for, and just taking that time to sort of create a plan or get into that habit of thinking about those things will really support you. And there's lots of resources that are available from the RSC. There will be resources available from other professional bodies that really kind of support you in terms of thinking about your career. So whether that's sort of practical advice, but also thinking about what those professional bodies also provide for you. So that network, that opportunity to interact with your community, which again will potentially support just helping you kind of reflect and think, but also potentially providing those opportunities for those next steps. And for anyone that is a member, you do have access to us within the careers team to support, and you can get in touch with us. There's lots of advice online, or you can drop us an email. So I'm conscious of the time. I do have to head off in a couple of minutes. So hopefully, if there are any questions, I can perhaps take one or two. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's a really nice question. So someone here is asking, is there anything that I could do to make it a bit easier identifying these sorts of things, self-reflection for myself? I've never been good at sitting down with myself and thinking about these things, and really struggle to know what my strengths and weaknesses are. And I sit here delivering this presentation, and you probably think, oh, she probably does it all the time, and it's something actually that does not come naturally to me. I am not naturally a self-reflector. I quite often will do the task in hand and then kind of move on. So I would say go gentle with yourself to start with. We talk about sort of building up this habit, and we all know it takes time to sort of build up those habits. So it's kind of identifying, okay, what might work well with me? Actually, might it be just having a chat with a close colleague and saying, I'm just trying to explore what my strengths are. What would you say are my strengths? Or it's kind of making that commitment to yourself to say, okay, once a week, I'm going to pick something from that week and think about reflecting on that. So it might be a conversation that I had with someone, or it might be something that perhaps didn't go as well as I thought it would, and reflected on that. So just take it steady in sort of asking those questions. Don't feel it needs to be all the time straight away to sort of build up that habit. There are some really good books that help with that. So a book that I would highly recommend is one called The Squiggly Career, which is by Sarah Ellis and Helen Tupper, and there's some really good exercises in there that help you with that sort of self-reflection around your strengths, your weaknesses, and what motivates you. And I just yeah, so another thing, yeah, someone here asking about using competencies in an application for RSI Tech or RSI as a template. So you can source that information to kind of go away and identify, okay, these are the things that I want to be sort of thinking about. Where might those gaps be, and how can I identify opportunities that enable me to kind of meet those competencies and develop myself. And I'm going to just choose one last question, which is it all right if we use notes during an interview, or does it depend on the employer? So I would, if you're doing a Zoom interview, I would say it's fairly easy. You can just literally have some notes in front of you. They don't necessarily need to know. If it's face to face, I would just ask them to check that they're okay with that. It might be that you just need to have a few bullet points. Probably, I'm guessing people asking that because it's a lot to try and remember sometimes in an interview. So sometimes just having those bullet points can really help. So I would say always just check and make sure that they're okay with that. And if they are, obviously don't go in with sort of reams and reams of paper. It's about literally just having a few sort of bullet point notes, or actually just in that interview, when you are being asked a question, just say to them, do you mind if I just jot down a few bullet points to help me just sort of structure my sort of response to you? Most people are quite open to that, and I hope that helps. Sorry, I've got to dash. I hope that was useful. If anyone's got any sort of follow-up questions or anything they want to ask, please do get in touch with me. My email address is there at careers@rsc.org. And thank you all for listening, and thank you for your questions.